All righty then, and hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today here at another Wednesday session, Wednesday version of RV Life Pro product training and Q&A. We've got a few things to talk about today. Let me remove that little guy there. Actually, I kind of like that. Um, so welcome. This is every Wednesday at 11 a.m. You're going to see us. This is Central Time, 11 a.m. Central. You're going to find this show on the RV Life YouTube channel, as well as the RV Life Facebook page. And we simultaneously broadcast that. We're still working on the video issues. It's a little bit blurry when I'm full screen. As soon as we go off to the small screen where we have other things going on, it's a little bit better. We think we've tracked that down to possibly a bandwidth issue. So bear with us, hang in there. We're going to get through that. So we'll try to jump to the smaller screen as we can. Today is special because they're doing construction outside the building. So I'm hoping that nothing gets too crazy and interrupts us there. Um, so with that in mind, let's see, I wanted to remove that and show that. How about that? And we're going to bring this on the screen and split this out. Actually, I think that's not what I want. Hang in there. I'm trying to find the screen that I want. I think we can live with that one. And I can also make myself go away and do that as we need to. So let's, in addition to covering, so today our topic is primarily going to be centered on filtering. But throughout that, as your comments come, we want to answer those as they come through as best we can. But we'll touch on several aspects, essentially centered around filtering. And we're going to jump out to this. I'm going to go ahead and I do want to change this slightly. I'm not really getting the picture that I want here. But we're going to live with that for now. I think we'll be okay. Let me jump over so I can see comments, and we're going to get started. Alrighty then. So what I want to show you is a few things here. Right now, you can see we've got a trip created here on the screen. This is a bucket list trip. It essentially starts from, where are we starting this thing from? Outer Banks in North Carolina all the way out to South Dakota. But in this case, I'm looking at this trip and I'm wanting to continue building out and build this trip out. So in this case, I'm thinking here, I want to come down from South Dakota. I want to come down here into Denver, right? So one of the common questions we see or common scenarios people ask about is they'll look at this trip and they'll say, okay, great. And as we've kind of demonstrated before, when I want to find a location, um, I want to sort of zoom in where the end of my driving radius appears. We've talked about it before, and we can touch over it again if we need to. But essentially, the driving radius is my decision, my settings about how far or how long I want to drive. So I've already set those. So I can see that if I'm headed down to Denver here, this is going to take me down 25. And as I zoom in, what I want you to notice here is you see all these little green tents. And as I zoom in and out, you can see they're all over the country. Obviously, we've got tens of thousands of campgrounds, RV parks, resorts, state parks, national parks, all that. So as I zoom in on where I want to find a campground, looks good, looks good. I've still got plenty. And then all of a sudden, they're gone. I mean, they are gone. If I zoom around here, there isn't a single campground in sight. So something's wrong, right? One thing we want to check is here in the upper right-hand corner, we can see that, I'm just checking on that. Yeah. Upper right-hand corner, we can see that my campgrounds are in fact turned on or visible. If I click on that little campground tent right there, you see it kind of gives it's a little eyeball with a slash through it, as in no smoking or no viewing, right? So I've turned that off. So if I click that, my campgrounds should be showing up. What else could be going on? Well, let's look at our friend filters. We see I have 2 filters engaged. So before we go any farther, let's just kind of refresh that. If you zoom in and the campgrounds all disappear, it's probably a filtering issue, assuming your campgrounds are turned on. So I got a filtering issue. Let's see what that might be. So I'm going to pop open my research tab, and I'm going to see down here at the bottom that I have state parks, forests, and preserves selected, and KOA selected. And so this is where we've got a problem, and we're gonna slow this down. We're gonna talk specifically about park types, and we're gonna find that points of interest, or POIs, also have a type. Whereas down here under brands and membership, I've chosen KOA. Essentially, and we've covered this before, but it always bears covering again, and particularly today, we're going over filters in general. I've essentially told TripWizard, show me all the park types of state parks, state parks, forests, and preserves that are KOAs. And of course, we're not ever going to find that. It doesn't exist. So I can see that if I remove this KOA from here, suddenly the state parks, forests, and preserves show up, and you can see all these brown icons here. So well, let's break this down a little bit and talk about filter stacking and things of that nature. So let's talk about what a park type is first. And I'll back that out by saying, what type of park is a KOA? Well, a KOA is a commercial or private park, right? It's either privately or commercially owned. And if we look at our types up here near the top, a KOA is not a state park or a forest. It's not a national park. It's not a Canadian park. It's not BLM land. It's not a city park. It's not a forest reserve. It's not a military fan camp. It's not a Corps of Engineers park. You get the idea. This section up here is all about park types. So in this scenario, if I wanted to say, look, I don't care about state parks to this trip, I want to find commercial and private parks. I could click commercial and private parks. And in here, I'm actually telling TripWizard, hey, look, I'm okay with commercial and private parks, and go ahead and show me state parks as well. All right. If I unclick that, the state parks disappear. If I reselect it, they show back up. We're giving you a lot of granularity here so you can really fine tune what you're looking for. So let's say in this case, I don't care about the state parks. I only want commercial and private. Now I'm going to see all commercial and private parks. I'm not going to see state parks, national parks, that sort of thing. And sure enough, if I troll around here enough, I'll find, here we go, down here is a KOA. Well, what if I want to, I want more granularity than that, and I just want to see KOAs. Now I can come down here to the brands and choose KOA. And there they are. That's all I'm seeing now. Now, so the question bears asking, do I even need to select this park type at all? And if I deselect that park type and leave KOAs, you can find that the answer is no. It reminds me as an ex-IT guy of Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, where there's 10 different ways to do the same thing. If you want to copy something, you can right click and choose copy. You can hit Control C or Command C, or you can go to a menu and choose edit, copy. And that's only 3 or 4 ways, right? There's always multiple ways to do many things. And what we're giving you here is multiple ways to do many things. The danger becomes is when you mix and match. And so the rule of thumb is fairly simple. If you're choosing park types, and so perhaps in this case, I only want to see state parks and national parks and forests. Anyway, that's it. And you can see that's all I'm getting. I can either choose a park type, or I can go down and I can basically nitpick through everything else with regard to the commercial and private and all that sort of thing. Um, I certainly find myself more often than not filtering by type at all. And you can see I have no filters selected. Look up here at the top where it says filters. I have 0 filters selected. And so what I'm saying is, look, I don't care where it is. I'm interested in it. Okay. I don't want to be limited. But then I can say in the other breath, well, hold on, because it's going to be the middle of summer perhaps, and I need to be able to run all my air conditioners and power and everything else I need. So I'm going to need 50 amp, right? So if I come here to my hookups and connectivity, I might decide, 50 amp is kind of my baseline. I have to have that. So I click on 50 amp and look how many things just dropped away, right? Let's look at that again. And of course, what we lost were a lot of the state parks or national parks, or things that have only 30 amp access or no access, or no electricity or whatever. So, you know, we've seen the same scenario play out as well, where I didn't, somebody says, well, let me clear my filters again. Somebody says, well, go ahead and show me all the state parks. And I got to have 50 amp and Wi-Fi. And now we're back to nothing again, except down here, 2 little state parks in the Denver area actually offer 50 amp and Wi-Fi. So here again, this is a case where we're stacking types with other items. And it's just, we just be aware of how that works. When in doubt, turn off your filters. You can either individually turn them off down here, or you can come up to the top and just choose the one button that briefly turns off all filters. A great use case for this button might be, let's say you've really dialed this in. We didn't pick a type, but we did say, okay, and in this case, I've got to have 50 amp, I've got to have Wi-Fi, I've got to have sewer, I've got to have laundry, whatever. I mean, just whatever your case is. So now I've got 4 different criteria selected. Let's add one more. Let's add pets to that. So now I've got 5 filters selected, and you can see that, my limits. There's not too many limitations, but there are some. Now, the more remote you get, the more those limits come into play. So if I come into here and say, well, I really needed to stay around Fort Morgan somewhere, and there's nothing there, we could say, all right, let's turn our filters off. Now there's some items there. Let's figure out what we might be sacrificing to stay here if I really must stay here. And if I click on this Silver Spur campground, I see I see what I'm sacrificing is that Wi-Fi. You can tell by these little icons here. That was what I was sacrificing by selecting that. And so I have to decide, look, do I really need Wi-Fi, or is my cell signal good, close enough to Denver that I can leech off of that for a hotspot, whatever. Again, it's all about making decisions. But what I didn't have to do was go in there and one at a time, turn on a filter, turn off a filter, turn on a filter, turn off a filter. I just went up to the top and hit filters. And of course, if I go back and hit them, there they are again. Let's take a we have a question on the board. Do we have parks? There are some filters and things that we may or may not have here yet. Certainly, we're in the Colorado area, and Colorado has certain herbal attributes associated with it. And at this point, I don't think we have any way to narrow that down. But this does bring up an interesting point. With every campground we have on our site, we can go to park details, and we can pop into the Q&A, tips and Q&A area here, and then we can actually read what others have discussed or found near this campground. So in this case, wild animal sanctuary, great place for pizza and wings, etc. We might see, we can take a look at another one. This one's north of Denver. And we'll look at the Q&A here. close to everything. And you'll see some tips here. Now, another along this same vein of filtering is that our search engine is location aware. And we've talked about this before, but again, we bring it up each time. Our search engine's location aware. So if I'm zoomed in here on this Denver area and I want to find, say, a winery, I can type in winery, and the places of interest, not so much the campground names, which is this top section, but the places of interest, you can see all of these suggested wineries are within this Denver locale. It recognizes where I'm searching. And so if I was to find the Infinite Monkey Theorem Urban Winery, there it is. And I could choose to add that to my trip, or I could just choose to make a note of the details. Perhaps I'm just interested in remembering to go there. I might grab the name, and then I might tuck it in a campground comment, like here, for example, just as a reminder. Now, I would probably do that with a campground in the Denver area, but just for the sake of demonstration. So, so these are some of the filter things. We talked about the search aware again. With the filters, there's let me look at my notes because I discovered I was playing around this week. Yeah, one thing about filters here, let's clear them real quick, and I'll show you because this can confuse folks. So let's say I've cleared my filters and I'm only interested again in seeing these state parks. Okay, so if I were to zoom out, I'm seeing only these state parks. And if I look at, I'm going to turn off campgrounds for just a minute. Let's remember that in this entire trip, I have other park types shown: KOA, FMCA, Passport America. So even though I'm filtering only on state parks, let's zoom in here a little bit. If I can find a state park in this area, I'm still going to see this type of campground that I have on my map. In other words, I've already selected this and added it to my trip. You can see as I highlight Lena KOA here on the left, it bobs up and down on my map. So don't let that confuse you and you think, hey, wait a minute, I only selected state parks. Why am I seeing a KOA? It's because you've already selected it on your map. So that's come up a few times. I wanted to touch on that. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, we've got a nice question here from Tim, and we can take a second just to touch this real quick, Tim. As we go along here, we'll try to hit these things. So Tim's question, of course, is how to get a TripWizard trip into the Garmin unit. So that's going to be a couple of steps. One of those steps involves your Garmin Basecamp software that you have to use to do this. Let's look at how we do it. If I have this bucket list trip and I want to get it into a Garmin unit, I'm going to click on the trip tools. We're going to go to export this trip. I'm going to go to GPS export, and it's going to give me these two file types. Typically, the Garmin Basecamp is going to want the GPX. Some items will use Rand McNally was real good with dealing with a CSV file. Either way, I click download. It's going to dump this download into my downloads folder on my laptop. Now I've got to use the Garmin Basecamp software, and you should be able to download that from Garmin, and import that GPX file that I've downloaded into the Garmin Basecamp. And then from the Garmin Basecamp, I'm going to push that into my Garmin head unit, either plug it in with a USB or SD card or however you're going to be doing that. Really, all we're doing on the TripWizard side is providing the GPX that you can now take into Basecamp and go through your motions with as they relate to Garmin. So hopefully that helps there. Let's take a look at. I want a quick reminder. We're gonna go now look at POIs, points of interest, and how they similarly interact the way that these campground filters do. But I want to remember, we've labeled this little tab here on the side research, and that's just, to me, it's a visual reminder that this is a planner. This is about taking the time to plan your trip and cover all the bases you're concerned about, particularly when you get into busy seasons where you can't necessarily just wing it. You want to make reservations and all those. Every part of your trip can be researched and planned ahead so you don't have fuel anxiety and worry about whether you're going to fit in somewhere, or are you going to be able to find a campground? Are you going to be able to find a rest area? Are you going to be found whatever it is you want to find? Are you going to be able to find a zoo to keep the kids busy? Whatever your criteria is, it's all about research and planning, and that's what this is. So we're going to jump over to points of interest, and we're going to see, once again, we have types. So if I choose fuel, of course, I got to zoom in. You're going to get this, see at this top, please zoom in to activate points of interest filters. Okay, just do what it says, zoom in. So we'll go in around Denver here. We'll zoom in a little bit. We'll hit fuel. Now notice when I click fuel here under the type section, it highlights all of my fuel types. Okay, that's great, right? It's convenient, it's easy. Let's say in my case, I really only stay at one type of fuel. Go into one type of fuel place because I have a credit card for that, right? I get 9 cents off a gallon or whatever it is, and it's very convenient. I'm only interested in the Pilot Flying J's. So instead of cluttering this up with all of these fuel types, I will clear those and then only select Pilot Flying J's. And there you go. I don't have all the clutter and I see exactly what I want to see. Another point here is, let me get this trip menu out of the way. As I move this map around, let's say I'm still interested in my Pilot Flying J's, but I want to see if I can find one somewhere up here. And it's like, well, you're telling me there's no Pilot Flying J's anywhere up here? Note this big red bar at the bottom. Search for POIs. When I click that, here we go, Big Springs. What's the reason for that? Well, if we tried to calculate and show you every single POI you were interested in, every time you move the map incrementally like that, the calculations would be crazy. It would slow it down like mad, and you would have just a terrible experience. Rather, just zoom in where you're looking and hit search. You're good to go. Of course, TripWizard shows you exactly where you'll need fuel. So we can see here in this trip that I've planned, I haven't taken into account yet, but I'm going to need fuel right here where this orange triangle is. So I'm typically going to zoom in a bit on that. I'm going to search for POIs, and there we go. I can even back up, and now I see I've got one on either side of me, and I just simply have to decide which way am I going. What's my, do I feel comfortable running my fuel a little bit longer? I can tell from the scale of 20 miles that this is probably an hour on either side. So I'm going to probably get fuel ahead of time rather than after the fact. You'll know your rig, you know your capacity, your reserve, and all those types of things. But in this case, I would certainly get fuel ahead of time. And there we go. So, but take advantage of this search for POIs. That's why it's there. You'll need it to refresh that screen. Think of it like a browser refresh, but a very localized and very specific type of refresh. Coming back over to our POIs, we have the same thing with rest areas. It's a type. Now, what happens if I say I want to see rest areas and fuel? No, it does not. It jumps to fuel. These types here, and it's a little bit of a mixed bag of what it wants to show you. And I think that's in part based on the volume of data it's going to need to display. So if I want to show you every fuel station and every rest stop, it'll do it. It just won't keep that highlighted. So it's a little bit confusing. Just bear that in mind. If you're not sure, clear the POIs and choose what you want to choose again. And then I can choose rest areas that way. It's a little bit confusing with that regard. The other things that we can see here down on area attractions. So if I click on amusement parks, you can see there's a fair spread of them. If I decide, well, show me aquariums, there's not many aquariums out there, are there? Let's go around Denver again. And we'll clear, let's hit aquarium. All right, there's a few aquariums. Now, if I jump back over to amusement park, you can see that it switches, it dumps the aquariums and then shows me only amusement parks. Here again, this is just when in doubt here, clear and refresh. And this is just because of the different ways the data is called. If I want to see the zoos, I get the zoos. Types are just a little bit funny. Here with, unlike the campgrounds, you can kind of stack some of these. So here's Cracker Barrels and zoos, right? Some of these can be stacked, and here's Pilot Flying J's. So it kind of depends on the area and what you're looking at. But when it comes to, they can have some stacking ability, whereas the campgrounds, there's certain combinations you just can't do. The POIs are a little bit more flexible, but what gets everybody is they forget to hit the red POI button when they want to refresh that after moving the map. So you can see here I've zoomed out too far again. And here's my, I typically don't need to hit search for POIs once I've clicked the button, but when I move that map, now I'm usually going to need to refresh it. So a couple of things there. The third item on here is hazards. We can show you those low clearances. Remember that Trip Wizard is going to route you around them anyway, based on the measurements you've plugged in. The other thing that gets folks is they look at this. Let me turn these rest areas off. Just like the campgrounds have a kind of a universal on-off button at the top, so do the POIs right up here next to your little avatar character. POIs can be turned on and off completely. So if I look at these hazards, it looks like I-25 has a low bridge right in the middle of it. We've touched on this before, but it's always worth repeating. Obviously, as we zoom in, still looks pretty sketchy. We zoom in, and we've actually seen this demo, this particular bit before. Now we can see that, no, this is a low clearance on a railroad bridge. And we've actually looked at the street view on this before. And we can see, yep, sure enough, there's that low bridge. 13.6 in the middle, but it's only, you can't have to back up a little bit. It's only 12.7 here on the sides. And I think it was 12.7, maybe 12.6. Back up a little bit. But anyway, the point of that being, you can show these hazards if you choose. Trip Wizard is going to route you around them anyway, but if you have any desire to see those, and it might be that you have a route planned and you don't plan on deviating from it, but there's a chance you want to pull over and check some other thing out, and you just want to check that area out. That's kind of a lousy example, but if I was headed down the 25 and I decided, well, for example, my kids live in Denver, so if my plan is to drive through Denver, but if time permits, I might pull over and give them a ring and say, hey, you guys want to have lunch, meet for lunch or something like that. I might be concerned about where I'm going to pull over because I don't want to do it where there's a 10-foot bridge, or the 10 is kind of a generic icon. But you can see here we've got another railroad bridge, and we've got something over here that's a little bit janky. So I would just want to be careful. And of course, this shows by Coors Field. Perhaps there's a game and I'm going to want to tailgate with the RV. I'm going to want to vet this out a little pretty carefully. Now, our Trip Wizard will route you around it, but if you want to investigate this ahead of time, that's what this whole business is about there. All right, let's see if we've got any more questions. Good, okay. Don't forget, ask your questions. We are doing this every week, every Wednesday. You can ask them live. We'll see them here on the screen like we did. Let me look at my notes and see what else I wanted to touch base with regard to filtering. We'll just touch base really quick again on the parks. Let me turn those on and zoom out. So one of the questions we frequently get asked is when we saw our example of a state park with a KOA, right? So we're not going to get any parks here, but yet, oh, there's all kinds of them. They're all over the country, state parks that are KOAs, right? Well, we look at that and we're like, well, every time I zoom in, they disappear. Well, we sort of explained why that happens, but why is it? It's because at this level, at this 30 or 50,000 foot view, we don't want to try to run the calculations for every square mile that's in our visible site here, or again, it would just bog down your system. It would be a CPU cycle nightmare trying to calculate that up at that level. As soon as we get a little bit closer, and one more, now we're dealing with a patch of land essentially that we can process and say, okay, show me all the KOAs that are state parks in this area. And of course, there are none, so we see none. But that's one reason why we can't see them all at this 30,000 foot view. Um, Filtering is great. Let's talk about park ratings. This one really gets folks because let's see, right now I have no filters engaged. I'm only going to go park rating. And of course, I want at least 4 stars, right? So I'm going to click, whoops, I'm not zoomed in close enough. We're going to zoom in, pick 4 stars. And now we're going to zoom out. And we're back in this Denver area. And looks like my selection is not particularly broad here. You know, my first inclination is, well, there sure aren't many campgrounds here in the Denver area. But if I were to turn off that filter real quick, look how many show up. And that's just simply because 4 stars is a pretty highly ranked campground. There are just not that many. Let's pick a couple here. Let's look at one. This one popped in. So that's that's a 4. It's a bad example, but it's 7.8. There's a calculation here where you're translating a rating of 10 down into 4. Let's see. Oh, well, that one's there anyway. So that's 4 stars, 8.4. I think if it's under 8, it won't show up. You know, here's, 1.5 stars. So if I saw this, if I was determined to stay here and I saw this rating, I would want to go to my park details and kind of check it out. That's a pretty unusual picture. So we won't even go into that. But anyway, the point of that is be careful with your ratings. Perhaps start with a 3 and then add some other criteria. Let's talk about big rigs and pull-throughs. So this is a tricky one for folks. This is going to be amenities. So I drive a 43 footer, so that's a big rig. Often my inclination is to just pick big rig access or pick pull through sites or pick both. And the thing you've got to be careful with here, and you can see there's a disparity in these numbers. I mean, how can there be what amounts to here 16 campgrounds in my visible range that have pull-throughs, or excuse me, that say they're big rig access, but they don't have pull-throughs? It doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's because some parks only have back-in sites, but they're big. I think particularly of, it's not in this visual here, but it was Pagosa Springs, Wolf Creek Lodge, I think is what it was called. Just lovely, wonderful campground, 9 out of 10 or something like that. But they're only back-in sites. They back into these gorgeous sites with scenery and gazebos and all kinds of stuff, but there's no pull-throughs at all. So just be careful when you're looking for amenities. Decide what's exactly important to you. If your goal is to have big rig access and stay somewhere for a week that's really nice, you might not want to display pull-throughs. particularly when you see the disparity here. Here this in this view, there's 18 sites have pull through versus 40 that are big rig. Um, so just bear that in mind. If you're looking for one night stops to get you going on your road, um, pull through is what you want to have selected. If you're looking for a great campground somewhere you want to stay a week, just be cognizant of that particular feature there. Okay. This is a great question. Anne would love to find quilt shops while vacationing. Is it possible with this software? So yes, Anne, it is. While I'm sure that we probably don't have quilt shops in our POI, what we can do is rely on that location sensitive search once again. So let's decide, let's just grab, let's say we are in the Albuquerque area. I have a specific reason for that, I think. There's Angel Fire. Let's say we're looking at the Albuquerque area and we're looking to stay a week out of here at Route 66, right? And I'm saying, while we're there for that week or 10 days or 2 weeks or a rally or whatever the case may be, maybe you're there for the balloon fiesta, whatever. But you think, what, while we're there, I'd love to find a quilt shop. So we zoom in on a reasonable amount of distance, okay? If I'm out here, that puts me, an hour or two in either direction, or, that's a little bit too far perhaps. But let's zoom in on this general area of the Albuquerque metropolitan area. And now we come up to the top and search for quilt. Now remember, and here we go, places of interest. If there had been any campgrounds with the word quilt in it, they would have shown up first, like we looked at before. But of course there aren't. And now we see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 quilting things, shops, something here in this area that's visible to us. And what we might do then is look at it. The quilt works, right? Certainly I can see where that is. We're not going to have a ton of data on that, but what I might do then is pop over to Google and just search for the Quilt Works Albuquerque. And now I can learn a little bit more about it. It is what it says it is. It looks lovely. And so now I know I want to go there. Now, the question is, do I want to go there as a side trip during a camping period, or do I want to hit that on the way in or out of town? If I'm just going to go there on a side trip, I'm probably just going to grab that address and paste it into my notes. I can come over here. Let's add that Route 66 to our trip real quick. We're going to stay there 10 days. We'll add it to our trip. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, maybe I'll just grab the website, or I might grab the address here. And I'm going to drop that in my Route 66 notes so that later, when I'm taking that trip, I know what to do. However, if I decided I wanted to stop there on the way into Albuquerque for some reason, or what I might do then is I would find that location again, and I would add it to my trip, but I'm not staying any nights, so I'm not going to put nights, and it's going to be right before Route 66. And now you can see here it is in my trip, basically on my way to Route 66. I could inversely, I could move it afterwards. I might even say, oops, I meant to do it after. Fine. We'll just drag it down and drop it here. And now we'll go by there after we stay. Whatever. If I'm going to do a side trip, I'm not going to put it on there. I'm just going to put the notes in like we did before. So hopefully that answers that question. And that really is true for anything, anything that you do. If it's on the way, add it to the trip. If it's a little side trip of some kind, add it to the notes and comments, and just keep that handy there. But the location sensitive search is a huge feature, and it makes up for not having every POI on the planet listed. I mean, it's you kind of have to decide where the heck are we going to draw the line if we're showing zoos, museums, restaurants, et cetera, at some point, bowling alleys, casinos, bicycle stores, Elks Lodge, whatever. At some point, we can't list everything that exists. So the location aware search is super, super handy. Also, this method of popping over to Google, is also going to work for something like Harvest Hosts, right? And if I want to add a trip, in fact, there's an article about it, but if I want to simply add my Harvest Host location, perhaps I've paid their subscription fee and I've found a host location and I've got the address, I can just go into Trip Wizard. I can drop that address right into Trip Wizard. You can see it finds it right here and it creates an address, and I can add that to my trip. I could relabel it Harvest Host, so I can relabel it whatever I want, Harvest Host Stop 3 or Super Duper Winery or wherever the heck it is that you're going, and I can label that and name it just the same way. I can add this to my trip. Maybe I'm staying there 2 nights, but I don't need this confusing address. I want to call it Harvest Hosts Winery, whatever the heck it's called, and I'm going to add it to the end of my trip. And now when I look at it here in the menu, there it is. So just because we can't show them to you, and obviously we can't show them to you if you have to pay for that information from Harvest Host, they would frown broadly on that practice. However, it's super easy to add that location to your RV Trip Wizard trip. And we are talking with them, and maybe something will come of that someday. So we're positive feeling about that. Okay, let's see if we've got any more questions. I don't yet. Let me double check my notes and see what else I wanted to cover. A quick note about, let's see. We looked at that, we looked at that, we looked at that. A quick sidebar here. Let me just jump over to rvlife.com. So occasionally you'll run across a coupon code or something like that, and you want to sign up for RV Life Pro. You've got a coupon from somewhere. Obviously, you get to RV Life, you try Pro for free, and it looks like we've got a lot of commitment here without any place for the coupon code. But rest assured, that comes if we continue payment. And annual subscription, we can rough this out a little bit. Put our email. It's going to fill some stuff in. That's terrific. 17-494-1111. And what is our address here? Gotta remember what our address is. And South Lake, Texas. And a zip code. Now, the reason we go through all this hassle, we agree to all this stuff here, which basically says it is a reoccurring subscription. We click continue to payment. Now, here is the coupon code. And it's actually gotten easier. There used to be a little button you had to click that said, I have a coupon code. Now we're just showing you the coupon code. Hallelujah. And 99 times out of 100, that coupon code is all capital letters. So let's not forget that. I would apply, add my card number, blah, 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 and I would start my trial. Now, even we often get asked, well, I don't want a trial. I know I want it. Just sign me up. You're still going to get a trial. It's some legalese with credit cards and all that kind of stuff. But the 7th day, it will then bill your card. So just so you know, that's happening. We use a reputable process here. We take almost every card, and we start free trial and the process works great. But coupon code, it's on the second screen and it's usually all caps. So just wanted to throw that out there. And so here's how our trial works. We have a great question for that. How does the trial work? So after you sign up, you're going to get an email, let you know where the resources and things are. If you are a brand new customer to RV Life, and in fact, I will show you something here. If you are a brand new customer to RV Life and you've never signed up or heard of any of these websites, then you'll get an email and you'll set the password and you'll log in. We always recommend, I actually had a couple of things on that thought. There is no place for a coupon code inside the app. The mobile apps, they have some pretty rigid rules about subscriptions and going through their app stores and all that type of thing. So when you sign up, don't do it through the app. Go to rvlife.com, use just whether you have a coupon code or not. I don't want to overemphasize the coupon code and make it confusing, but start your trial at the website at rvlife.com. And then once you have logged in, you've gotten your email, you've logged into RV Life Trip Wizard, you're usually going to start your journey there. And it's going to take you where, of course, where we've been this whole time. Once you've established your email address and password, now you know when you download the app exactly how to sign in. Don't let the app, decide, well, I'm just going to use Face ID and sign you in however I want to. You want to take control of that process and use your email address and password that you've already established work here on RV Life Trip Wizard and sign in. Once you've signed into RV Life, of course, you'll set your RV parameters and height and weight, length and propane status, things like that we've looked at previously. We'll find those under our trip settings, of course. Our RV info. You're going to choose your RV. You're going to establish your profile from RV Life Trip Wizard, and you can start planning a trip. When you're ready to navigate the trip, we'll pull that up here in the RV Life app. And in fact, we can show you that. Let's bop that baby out of there. Hope I won't turn myself off somehow. And we'll show you the app. So we can see when we first log into the app, we may get this home screen. You'll have your campground map where we've got filters there, the same types of filters we saw in RV Life Trip Wizard, we have right here on the phone as well. And those trips that we had in RV Life Trip Wizard are here. Of course, there's that bucket list trip that we had. And that's all right there. Within RV Trip Wizard, or within the app, here under More, you have your profile, and this is where we're going to sign in and sign out. Here at the bottom is sign out or sign in. So number one, you want to make sure you sign in with the proper credentials. Number two, if you're having any issues seeing your trips, just sign out and sign back in, particularly if you haven't used the app in a long time. But throughout this initial 7-day period, you're going to have a full subscription with full access to everything. On that 7th day, if you haven't gone and canceled it, you're going to then, your card will be charged and you'll have that trial. You'll have that full subscription. Of course, we've talked about it before again, but RV Life Pro consists of multiple things. Of course, you're getting the RV Life Trip Wizard. All the campground data comes here from RV Life Campgrounds. You're getting a tool called RV Life Maintenance, which is a maintenance tracker for your RV. You're getting RV Master Classes. We're working on integrating that. And of course, you'll get the mobile app that we just saw. Let's see if I can get back to just RV Life. A lot of that is laid out right here on our RV Life homepage. And we normally probably don't touch on the selling or purchasing aspects of this as much as we do just the training and understanding the product, which is probably more our goal uh, than trying to sell it. But without a doubt, if you're interested, we want you to get it. As far as the mobile app, we touched on it pretty heavily last week, but this week here again, your home screen. First of all, your phone is going to determine where you are based on the GPS of your phone, of course, and it's going to show you what the weather in that area is, which is going to show you campgrounds that are nearby, rest areas and fuel stops that are nearby. And then we're going to go a little farther away. Here's a campground that's a little farther away. Of course, we have loads of our articles and favorites and things like that. From the map, suppose I didn't plan an RV trip. It's Friday and I didn't plan a trip, but the weather looks great and we get out of work early and we just want to go a couple hours away and take the RV out, right? I can just use that map. You can see I've got all kinds of filters here: big rig, 50 amp, cable, Wi-Fi, water, pets, whatever my criteria is. And I can see I've got a selection, and maybe I'll come up and decide this little guy right here looks good. The By the Lake RV Park looks great. I might learn a lot more about the details of it if I don't already know them. I can see the rating. I can see pictures, 17 pictures here. But ultimately, I just want my directions. And I'm just going to go. And it'll build a route. So even if you're not, even if you haven't planned a trip, that's a great feature. Now, I will say this. For those short ad hoc journeys to places you're familiar with, this is not a problem. This is that's what the app is designed for. However, when you're just, I'm not going to grab this same tool and say, hey, I think I want to go to Crater Lake. Let me just pick a campground and hit go, because I have no idea what my journey's like, where it's going, where's fuel, where's campgrounds along the way, I'm going to be winging my entire trip. And that's fine if you're used to that and you're in a small RV and you can afford to wing it to that extent. But if I'm planning that big trip to Crater Lake, I'm using RV Life Trip Wizard. I'm planning it properly using all the techniques we've looked at over the last few weeks. And then I'm coming back here and I'm going to trips and I'm going to find that Crater Lake trip and tap on it and use that for my navigation. You can't leave that much to chance necessarily. Okay, let's, what else have we got that we want to look at here? We talked a lot about the app more last week. Another reminder, again, we have to really almost bring this out every time. Yes, your iPad or your Android tablet will run the app, but most of those do not have a separate GPS chip. Unless you're paying a separate cellular data charge, or your device somehow otherwise explicitly says it has a GPS chip in it, it doesn't, and most of them don't. And so you can't just use a tablet for navigation and leech off the phone's hotspot for that navigation, because you're dealing with the Wi-Fi and the internet portion of it. And so if your cell phone, if you're headed down I-70 and your cell phone registers at a tower 3 miles north of the freeway and you're headed west, your tablet leaches that, it gets your internet from your phone, and the tablet says, oh, I'm 3 miles north of the freeway. It doesn't work that way. It's not successful. It's not going to work. You can use it to look at data and whatnot, but if you're navigating, it has to be a GPS chip on your phone for certain. Many tablets have that ability, but most people don't purchase that. It's typically unnecessary expense that people don't anticipate needing. So bear that in mind when you're using tablets and things. They're great for looking at the data, but they're not going to be that hot for navigation. Just like RV Life Trip Wizard, we've talked about it before. Let's look at that real quickly because, and we've touched on this again, but let's hit it one more time. My screen comes up. We go back to Trip Wizard. On a full computer or laptop screen, this is pretty much what this is going to look like. I can close these tabs like that, and essentially you can see I have three components: the trip, the map, which is in the center, and the research here on the side. On a tablet or an iPad or a phone, that real estate is smaller and those menus start to move around. So we can simulate that by zooming in, and there is what this would probably look like on a tablet and on a phone as well, where your trip and your map and your research and your account buttons, these all get pushed to the bottom. And so everything looks a little bit different, but it's still all there. But just bear this in mind when you're trying to use RV Life Trip Wizard on a different device or a different computer, or even if it is on your computer and you've got the magnification turned real high and you wonder, why doesn't this match any of the videos, right? This is why. And for most computers, you can zoom out and zoom in with Control plus minus or Command plus minus, and I can get it right back to normal with a couple of keystrokes. Speaking of videos, we have, of course, the RV Life YouTube channel, the RV Trip Wizard YouTube channel. It's real easy to get to the videos pertinent to RV Life Trip Wizard by clicking on the little avatar guy here in the corner, go down to Help, come down here to Video Support, and this will take you right to the Trip Wizard channel with the bulk of all of our handy dandy videos to help you get rolling. And of course, Rick asks, does an iPad have a GPS chip? It might. Most of them don't. You'll know you have a GPS chip if you are paying for a separate cellular data subscription. So if you look at your AT&T bill and you have one phone and it says, hey, I have two connections, what's going on? Then your iPad might have a GPS chip and you might be paying for a separate data connection. If you're not paying for a separate, in other words, if your iPad only works if you're on Wi-Fi or it's tethered to your phone, then you do not have a GPS chip. On that note, let's talk about the download real quick. We looked at it briefly last week again, but let's do, I want to share a different, what is that one? I want to share a different screen. Let's go back to the app real quick. So when I look at the app, when I want to navigate one of these trips, let's say we take our bucket list trip. If I'm going to navigate, like if I'm sitting in the driver's seat right now, I'm hitting this red arrow and I'm ready to roll. But before I do that, if I want to cut down on data usage and I want to ensure that if I hit a pocket of area where there's no cell coverage, that I don't lose my GPS while I'm still at home or while I'm still on the campground with Wi-Fi, I'm going to go ahead and download my maps ahead of time. Now, the nice thing about this is it only downloads the states that your route touches. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's 12 states. It's a big trip. But I'm going to grab all that data ahead of time before I leave. Not when I'm sitting in the driveway ready to pull out. When I'm at home, when I'm thinking about my trip, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to download all of that data ahead of time. Now, it's not necessary. It's just a good idea. Conversely, if I'm taking this little short local trip here, which is 2 hours out of Dallas, I'm not going to lose a cell signal. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So I'm not going to bother downloading the entire state of Texas just so I can drive to this little Corps of Engineers that's 2 hours away. It's not necessary. So, but bear that in mind when it comes to downloading that data, is to get that stuff ahead of time. And that way, if your iPad does have a GPS chip, which of course your phone does, download that map data on the iPad ahead of time again, so it just has to work a lot less harder, uh, a lot less, a lot less to show you and display that data if it's already got the data locally instead of having to pull it down as you go. It'll cut down on your data usage as well. Um, okay, so do we have any more questions out there? We've kind of bounced around today, and that's really what it's about. You know, I come in with a plan of things to talk about, and a list of a few things that our support team wants to mention. But ultimately, we want to answer the questions you guys have. And yeah. All right, so that's about an hour. If there's nothing left, nothing else, any questions wise? Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. We're still battling some of the technical hurdles here with the internet speed, but we're surviving. You know, we're getting the information out, which to us is the most important. We want everybody to know that we have resources available. Not only, of course, do we have um, this. Let me stop this one and bring this other one back up. Thank you, David. Not only do we have, there we go, this broadcast, which is weekly essentially throughout the busy season. We have, and I was just there, our help menu. Of course, there is documentation, community support. This takes you out to irv2.com where we've got threads running on. You can ask your questions there. We've got, of course, Facebook groups and things like that. And then we've got our video support. And of course, we have our support team that works all hours of the day and night. They're real RVers that know our software. They're all over the country. They're all part of our team that answer questions so that we can get an answer to you as quickly as possible. If you're ever having, if you ever have to ask a question that's just something's misbehaving or you're not sure about something, always mention what trip you're working on. So for example, we were on that bucket list trip, and if I had some question of, I don't know, the quilt shop didn't show up properly, or I deleted it accidentally, I don't know, whatever. But hey, mention it was on the bucket list trip. Um, uh, Particularly if you see anything like why is it routing me this way? That's a common scenario. Why is it routing me this way? Here's the trip name, and it's from Colorado Springs to Raton. You know, why is it routing this way? Whatever. We can go into those settings. We can go into your trip. We can look at your settings, and we can see, oh, well, you have this turned on, or that turned on, or this turned off, or that size is the wrong size, or we don't know, it's a mistake. Let's report it. Let's fix it. You know, we have the ability to fix these things, and just continually the improvement process is not, hey, well, let's improve something next month. It's literally daily. We're tweaking, improving, and fine tuning so that the experience can be the best it can be. If you run across a missing park, a missing campground, or an RV park, we've talked about this before, is come to this help menu and go to this page. The first thing we're going to do is have you start typing the name of that park in. Why are we doing this? Number one, this eliminates that filter scenario that we discussed at length earlier. It also gives us a chance to sort of look at the names. You know, we looked at this last week or the week before, where it's like Oasis RV Resort versus Oasis RV Park. And depending on how fast you type and what you're looking for, you might miss the fact that, oh no, it's actually called Oasis RV Resort or something to that effect. Or we'll see a name where Mom and Pop's Campgrounds dash KOA, whereas you're looking for KOA Bartlettsville, you know, along those types of things. So this gives us a chance to have you give us more information to make sure it's really missing. And then we have an opportunity to perhaps show you, hey, it's not actually missing. Or if it really is missing, gives you a chance to let us know, hey, this park isn't here. Maybe it's brand new, maybe there's been a name change and you aren't aware. Maybe it's in the boondocks and nobody's ever been that way before, whatever the scenario is. It's pretty rare that we don't have a campground. Most of the time, it's usually filtering or some name nuance that somebody isn't picking up on. Most of the time, all those campgrounds are there. We have a videos tab here, but I would eschew that and go back to here and go to the video support instead. So we're always trying to provide as much support and help as we can, and we'll continue to do that. This is a great question. We get this all the time. Are we adding Harvest Hosts and Boondockers Welcome? This is, we're talking to them. Obviously, mechanically, we could provide those, but they would be really upset because that's what you're paying them for when you sign up for that subscription, is that protected location information. We would not only be doing something potentially illegal, it just wouldn't be right. We're all in this together. We're all in the RV business. We're all trying to make a living here. And if we just gave you that data, it just wouldn't go well. So we're working with them on trying to make that happen in a way that's mutually beneficial for both of us. Until then, and we've demonstrated this before, all you've got to do is pull up that Harvest Host location and grab that address. Of course, there's not going to be one here, but grab that address, come into TripWizard, and if that, here you go. Let's say this is that address right here. Turns out, okay, that's a Harvest Host location. It's in the middle of Lincoln, Nebraska. You never know, right? Let's add that to our trip. We're going to stay there 3 nights. We'll change the name. Maybe it's not, maybe it's HH for Harvest Host, and it's Lincoln Winery and Sheep Farm, right? And we're going to stay there 3 nights, and we're going to add that to our trip. And now here it is. It's tucked away at the end of our trip. Maybe we didn't intend for it to bring it here. Maybe it was supposed to be after this campground. We'll just slide it up. No worries, but it's very easy to add a location to your trip. And it keeps everybody out of hot water and keeps us all on a good terms and good relationship. So, yeah, I mean, Harvest Host and Boondockers Welcome is a separate company. It's a separate subscription. It's a separate entity. And you can absolutely add them to your TripWizard trip, but we don't have our fingers into their back end yet to somehow authenticate you and verify you paid them for a subscription and then expose those locations to you. It's on everybody's dream list, everybody's wish list. Vice versa, Harvest Host would love to be able to have you book a location and push it into your TripWizard trip. All kinds of things that folks would love to do. We would love to do this. Without divulging a whole lot, we're talking to them. Just, like we talk with anybody that's interested in integrating our platform, because our audience is so big and because the product is so good. We're talking with folks always about how can we make it better, easier, simpler, and kind of in the IT world, we always called it the single pane of glass, where you had access to all your resources and servers and things like that. We want to be that same single pane of glass to get you into virtually any campground location that exists. Right now, of course, the industry is very fragmented with regard to booking. However, with every campground or park we show you, you go to your park details, we're always going to give you a website and a phone number. Make it as easy as we possibly can for you to go ahead and book a stay and add that to your trip. So hopefully that is helpful, and we appreciate you guys asking those questions. Yeah, That's why we're here, is try to get this stuff out on the open and make it that much easier for someone else. So, all righty, we will give this last call for questions. Yeah. So this is a good one. Moving on the screen on an iPad it can be difficult, and that's really just comes down to the dexterity of a touch screen. Now, for example, if I go right now, I am using an external mouse to move this screen around. And here I'm using a touchpad. So what I have to do on a touchpad, I have to press two fingers. That ain't it. I don't know what I have to do. There we go. I have to press and hold to move it around. And once I get it going, it's fine. But you can see there's a little bit of slop in the play right there versus how quickly and efficiently it is with the mouse. We can make this even more difficult or more subjective by making it a touch screen and trying to drag it around with your fingertip, right? Uh, Add to that the thing we looked at earlier, which was the zooming in. So we said that on an iPad, it often looks like this. Let's see if I can replicate that again. And now, even just a little movement gives me a lot of, how do I want to say this? A little movement by my finger on the touchpad gives me a lot of movement on the map or a lot of real estate that gets by. And so if I'm down here trying to decide on these 3 campgrounds, just a little bit of movement and boom, they're off the screen, right? So um, dexterity on an iPad is just multiple multiple factors. It's screen magnification, it's your touching ability, it's the sensitivity settings on the iPad. All of those things kind of factor in when we are, when you're doing anything with a touch screen or a touchpad. I've gotten pretty good with the Mac touchpad. The external mouse is obviously fine, but it's not always convenient, on an airplane, for example. I mean, I don't know how much I work on an airplane, but any area with a tight quarters like that where I need my elbows, you better be used to the touchpad. An iPad is a good example of that because there's no physical keyboard and there's really no mouse to hook up to it. So you'd better get used to it. So yeah, it's more difficult than a laptop, but that's just a getting used to it thing. Um, Similarly on a phone. Now, I have seen, and I've said this, told this story before, but I'll say it again. Hershey, Pennsylvania, the Hershey RV show last year, a lady came up to me to show me some things, and she was easily in her 70s, maybe more, and she was flying around that phone like a 14-year-old. I mean, it was unbelievable what she could do, and it's simply because that's how she did everything. And she had practice. She got good at it. She could do more on that phone in the time that I watched her than I think I could do on a laptop. I mean, it was mind-boggling. Whoops, I just kicked the camera. It was mind-boggling. One of our moderators on one of our forums uses his phone for everything, and it's like you would never know because it's quick and instantaneous. It's all about practice. It's all about getting used to it, and there's no magic potion other than fiddling with settings and getting used to things. Yeah, so this is a great comment and a very timely comment. So some directions of finger functions for these features would be nice. Yes, I agree with that. And we've actually started making changes. It's a process, okay? But many will recall or notice that the open trip functionality changed, right? We talked about this last week. Instead of this pop-up here with the smaller buttons and a pop-up action going on here, we switched to this menu here. Yes, it's different. Sure, not everybody loves it because it's different, but what it is much more mobile friendly for fingertips and things like that. It eliminates a pop-up, which many browsers and devices aren't, have problems with. And it also provides a much easier, fatter, finger-friendly resource or tactile uh, ability than you can see here now these big open trip buttons and big X's and things like that. So getting to that more mobile friendly and you know what, maybe we can do, it's actually a pretty good idea there, David, is we're starting to recreate some videos and things, and maybe a video exclusively on iPad navigation would be a fantastic idea. I'm going to make myself a note because I love that idea, as a matter of fact. While we're thinking about updating some videos, so let's do a video exclusively on iPad navigation, tablet navigation, I guess is the broader sense of the term, but iPad for sure. Okay, so note made. That would be great. And yeah, David, I'll put your name down on my list in case I need some testing or something. Where's my cursor? Okay, so we might end up needing some feedback or something on that. Okay, good stuff. What else have we got out there? We got nothing but time and bandwidth, right? Or digital storage space. I don't know what the bandwidth's like. It's not great here, but we're surviving. I think quality-wise, once I get down in the small box, it's fine. It beats trying to be at home and compete with the dogs. Right now, I'm only competing with a grinder out there. You guys probably can't hear that. And the train has been, knock on wood, the train has been kind to us and hasn't been too crazy of a background noise. All right, I'm going to double check my notes one last time. Next week, we'll have a new topic. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we'll cover some other aspect of RV Life Trip Wizard. Most of our material here will focus, unless otherwise asked, we're going to focus on RV Life Trip Wizard and the RV Life app and their interaction together. It's by far and away the most, I don't want to say confusing or complicated. It's the most in-depth resource. It's the app is what it is, but if you haven't signed in right and you don't understand how it reacts with Trip Wizard, you need to know that Trip Wizard, of course, is a very in-depth piece of software that is very powerful and just takes time. I liken it to sort of Excel, right? I can use Microsoft Excel to add a column of numbers, and it's super easy. Almost anybody can figure that out. But the minute you start using Excel to create pivot tables and write code in VBA and do a bunch of other fancy stuff that it can do and link to other spreadsheets and all that, that skill level goes up and you got to learn it. It takes time and all that. So Trip Wizard's kind of the same way. It's really easy to pick a starting point, pick an ending point, let it draw a route, but it's all the other nuance and how it can help you and all the other details that are really its power and what it's for. So if think of it this way, and I always use this again with something like Excel. If I can think of it, it's probably possible. In other words, gee, wouldn't it be nice if I can imagine it, then probably it's already doable. Particularly with something as powerful as Excel. Similarly with Trip Wizard, hey, I should be able to do this, or wouldn't it be nice if I could do this? It could probably be done. We've probably already thought about it, and we can show that to you. We didn't really touch base a little bit. We touched base a little bit today on Street View, satellite view, elevation, grade, all these other features that are built in. And we'll take different times and talk about those throughout the summer. Be prepared again next Wednesday at 11. Get those questions thought out. Type them up ahead of time if you want, so you can drop them into the chat window. And let's try to cover those things you're having trouble with, the questions you have. We try to hit everything today, and we try not to leave any stone unturned. So hopefully we've got that done today. And we'll just call that a wrap. I'm delaying here. I don't see any more questions. So we'll call that a wrap for this Wednesday. We'll see you next week on the same two channels, the RV Life YouTube channel and the RV Life Facebook page. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.